things were quite very last minute. So I totally get it. Don't worry. It's I'm just launching the YouTube right now, so people can start seeing us, and also here. So let's give an official start here. Good afternoon, everyone, or evening, or wherever you are located, because I know we have people from all over. Thank you so much for joining this very last day of the Global Butterfly Week. As always happens, the best is for the last. So actually, this today we have two amazing talks. One first with Guy Pierre. Please correct me 1,000 times if I say your last name incorrectly. But anyways, we have Guy, and then 3-4 hours later, we're gonna have Matt One. He's from Australia. He's gonna give us a really nice talk as well. So people are just starting to trickle in. I see a few here in YouTube. I see a little bit also in Zoom. So please sit tight. Let's wait a few minutes so we can get officially started. But again, thank you so much for joining us, and yeah, we'll get started fairly soon. Thank you.
Meanwhile, good afternoon, good evening to those who joined us. My name is Guy Pe'er. I'm originally from Israel, but I live in Germany for many years, and I'll be waiting a few minutes until we are starting, and then I'll share my presentation.
Thanks, Guy. And yeah, just as always, people from here Zoom, of course, you can just shoot your messages at any point through the Q&A or through the chat. I'll be fielding all of those questions to Guy, and people from YouTube as well. Just use the chat, and I'll be happy to field all those questions at the end of the presentation. So it's 4 minutes past the hour here where I am located. Well, anywhere in the world. So let's wait just a couple of minutes more, and then we can get started. I'm gonna turn off the mic in the meantime in YouTube. YouTube. Here in Zoom, we're still waiting a few more people, but I think it's already 6 past the hour, so it might be a good time to officially start this this talk with Dr. Guy Pierre. So Pierre. So, anyways, I'm just gonna launch the official event here. So again, thank you so much for all people joining us. I know it's Sunday. Some people might be already tired for an entire week of intense activity that we've had here in the Global Butterfly Week. But as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we always save the best for last. So today, Dr. Guy Pierre is joining us, and he's going to be sharing a lot of his experience and double thanks, by the way, because he's joining us all the way from Germany, which is not a really nice timing for him, but still he's here willing to share a lot. So anyways, Dr. Guy is a conservation biologist at the UFZ and IDEV in Germany, leading the working group of agriculture and ecosystems in the Department of Biodiversity and People. He is butterfly expert and one of the founders of the Israeli Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, but also a policy expert working especially on European policies such as the Common Agricultural Policy and the Nature Restoration Regulation. Being both a scientist and an activist for nature protection today, he'll be telling about how to link them too, which is beautiful. So just shut myself now. It's I leave the space for you, Guy. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's just get started.
Okay, so thank you very much for everybody being with us. My name is Guy Pe'er, as Rodrigo mentioned, and originally I come from Israel and I live in Germany indeed for many years. And today I'll try to share some stories, followed by explanations about why are we doing monitoring, and then how are we using that for action. But for that, the first part is about storytelling. It's about how do we tell the story of a butterfly, our own stories, and why are we doing that? So I think the reason you're attending this today is because you wanted to hear about butterflies and because you love butterflies. So the first thing to do is to show you some nice butterfly pictures, but also to give you this feeling of diversity, of biodiversity. In that case, the diversity of butterflies throughout the world. And butterflies have a lot of really interesting behaviors. Some of them are really famous, like migration, for instance. I'm not going to show you a picture of the monarch, but instead the African monarch and the painted lady are quite famous for migrating and making really large distances from sub-Saharan Africa all the way to Europe, and they do it through several generations a year. But actually, a lot of species are doing that. Also in arid areas, or particularly in arid areas, you can see species which are going from the desert, lowland areas and penetrating every year and changing the distribution basically all the time. So I don't know how many of you have happened to hear about the short-tailed blue, about the large southern Arab, or other species doing that, but quite a few species are actually quite good flyers and can reach from one side to the other. Once the temperatures are higher, once there's enough rain, they can expand and respond to weather conditions and climate. However, these are the minority, and we'll come back to that issue later on. Another interesting behavior is one that actually I investigated in my PhD, was hilltopping. I don't know how many of you noticed when you're going hiking, traveling around the world, wherever it is, if you're going up to a mountaintop, or if you're sitting on the Maya temples in Central America, or just traveling and you're sitting to rest, often you have this feeling that the flies are sitting around you or around your face, and it's actually correct because you're the mountaintop. But butterflies are doing that as well, and this is a lacking behavior, a behavior where the males will gather, fight with each other, wait for the female to arrive, the female will catch the first male more or less that they will meet, and then they will leave the place. For me, this was an interesting behavior because it's one where it's clear what the motivation is, but I wanted to investigate how they make decisions, how do they reach the tops. And that was one of the topics I've been studying when I did my PhD, simply in order to understand the butterflies, to think about the world from their side. Another thing I don't know if you're aware of is that many butterflies are actually territorial. So the feeling that you might have when you're in one place and the same butterfly goes back and forth or even sits on you or around you, you might have this feeling that they're defending a territory. And in some cases, this is correct. The case of the two-tailed pasha was one that I was completely occupied by when I was a teenager, because I went always to the same site. There was always the same tree and the same butterfly that was going up. And in order to meet that butterfly, which is pretty stunning, it's what you call a relict butterfly. It stayed in the Middle East and in Europe, Southern Europe, since the period of 2 million years ago, when all these areas have been subtropical forests. Of course, now we have the Sahara, but some species like this one stayed in the Middle East. And those people that work in Africa or South America in tropical areas, they know the Caraxes group. They're pretty royal butterflies, and this one is one of them. And when I went to meet this butterfly, I would throw cones upwards or things that are black in order to be attacked basically by this butterfly showing up and showing off. It's also a hill-topping butterfly. But what fascinated me was that I really wanted to have access to eggs or to raise the butterfly at home. And it took me a long time, but because of fires that happened in Mount Carmel at this time, it was actually pretty easy to find eggs because the trees were very fresh and it was in the right height. These pictures are not mine. I took them from Wikipedia, but still, for me, this was a fascination that I wanted to share with you about the metamorphosis, the magic where an animal starts in an egg, then a very strange larva hatches, grows. Uh, it has to eat a lot. At the very end, they have to shed their skin several times, and at the very end, they suddenly stop eating, hang themselves from above. For 24 hours, they wouldn't move, and suddenly they will stretch themselves to the back and pupate. It's actually the skin that goes up and slowly goes up and up until it falls down, and then the skin under, they do not bear cocoons, but simply the skin under has a new structure, and within that new skin, or what we call a pupa, basically a new animal emerges. So there's nothing else in a soup, and within this soup, a new creature is being created, reorganized. The original legs in the front become the legs later on of the adult butterfly. And then after X number of days, in that case weeks, they will have to push themselves down before they actually hatch. You can see the colors of the adult butterfly through the shell of the pupa, and then they push themselves up. They have to do it really quickly, hang themselves, expand the wings. If they fall at this point, they will not manage to do that, so they have to hold tight, expand the wings, dry out, and only then they're ready after a few hours for taking their first flight. And what I just described to you, from a butterfly to the next butterfly, is what you call a life cycle, from beginning to the end of their lives. Now, this is a story of one species, and when we want to learn anything about butterflies, the most important thing to know is not what they feed on as adults, but rather what they feed on as larvae. And in that case, this is very good news for the butterflies that they are eating as larvae the leaves of the Greek strawberry tree, which is a forest species. And most protected areas in Europe, in Israel, in many areas of the world are forests. And the consequence is that this butterfly is not threatened, at least not by development or deforestation, or at least in the areas of the Middle East and Mediterranean. The next butterfly I wanted to share with you in terms of storytelling is another one that I've been studying quite extensively in 2006 and 2007, after we learned that there's a threat of building up in one of the areas of the coastal plains where this butterfly occurs. It's called the Levantine silver line. It only occurs in Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Israel, very limited populations in the world. And it has very unique behavior. When you watch the butterflies, they don't do anything. They're pretty boring. All they drink nectar, the males don't do anything. But then if you follow the female that suddenly disappears and lands on one of the ratema bushes in a sandy area, then the female will start walking down into the bush, tapping with her abdomen or the belly on the plant. We don't know really why it does it, and then reaches the ant nests of a very specific ant from a Crematogaster species. There are two species of ants, and they will come to the entrance of the ant nest and lay their eggs there. After about a week or two, I got a tip from Jeremy Thomas. Look for the points on the eggs because then it's a good sign that the eggs are about to hatch. And this was a $1 million tip. I had to lie down at 40 degrees Celsius on the hot sand to watch this unbelievable event. It takes a few hours, but while the egg has to cut um, through the eggshell, which is really hard to protect itself, the ants already start accompanying it and marking it. And there's a nanny egg that is going wild and taking care and accompanying this larva all the way in. They have to walk and cribble by themselves about 3, 4, 5 centimeters until they reach the ant nest, and then they would feed. The ants will feed the larva. And in order to learn their life cycle, we had to actually grow the ants in the lab. We had to bring the ants, create all kind of attempts of building up a nest for them. That was a lot of experimental work with Professor Yaakov Ofer. And eventually we managed to have one larva that grew large enough, and we even sent some students at night to check that the larva is not cheating and eating the ants at night, as some of the larvae actually are cheating them. In that case, it produces a pheromone. It produces a set of smells or a scent that the ants are probably thinking that it's the queen or one of their members. And so they feed this larva. And the ant nests where there were larvae in were also a lot more stable in terms of the population. So we had the feeling that it also giving something to the ants in return. However, the reason why we studied these butterflies is affinity of the butterfly, at least in the coastal plains, to what you would define as ugly places. These are sites which are excellent for building up, and the city of Hadera or other cities need to expand. This is in most areas of the world. The floodplains are, of course, the best for agriculture, for building up, etc. And so there's a huge amount of pressure in losing one habitat after the other. And as of just last week, we learned of another plan to build up a new road and a new railway system exactly in the most healthiest populations of this butterfly in the coastal plains. And master student Zohar Afek, who worked with us some years ago, took the data which I collected in 2006 and 7, where we've seen hundreds of butterflies in one of the sites. I estimated at that time that we have a population of 10 to 20,000 individuals. And she estimated what is the situation in different populations. We realized that it divides into dry habitats and some areas where the habitat is enhanced by water, for instance, where water is being collected from rainwater, then the populations are actually relatively stable. But when she analyzed all the populations dividing into the two different types of habitats, in one of the sites, which had, as I said, hundreds of individuals, we've seen 97% decline, and last year we've seen maybe one individual only. And in some parts of this site, it was also burned, and there are no individuals at all. So we're losing one site after the other. But the reason we know that is that we're monitoring, and the reason we can do something about it or trying to do something to fight for it is because of monitoring. Which brings me to the second part of my talk, which is about opening our eyes and collecting data, which is basically the action of monitoring. I think some of you attending this presentation knows what monitoring is, but when you're driving your car, you're doing that as well. When you're checking your pulse, you're monitoring how well the system is operating. The butterflies are the bioindicators. They are indicators of the ecosystem. They are indicators of the environment. And so by watching them, by monitoring them, we have potentially early warning signs if butterflies are disappearing or species of butterflies are disappearing, because we know so much about them, then we can learn something about what we can do about that. And one brilliant idea of how to monitor butterfly was brought up by Ernie Pollard, who started monitoring butterflies using what you call Pollard walk after his name. This picture is really famous for everybody in Europe and in the US or other countries who has been doing what you call butterfly monitoring schemes. And the idea is super simple. You walk along the same path again and again every week during the season, and you're repeating that every year. In 1981, Chris van Zwaay made this drawing that you see here, and started the monitoring scheme also in the Netherlands. And slowly it expanded to thousands of monitoring sites in Europe, but also in the US. In Israel, we started it in 2009. I know that there's monitoring schemes in many other countries, coming to 37 countries meanwhile, and I'll come to that point soon. But the most important thing is that when you're using the same method for years and years in so many sites, you can take all these data together and you can develop an index which looks at the populations of all the butterflies together. In that case, it's an index that takes 18 species together that occur or are affiliated with grasslands in Europe. And this is called the Grassland Butterfly Index, showing that we have major declines of butterflies over the past 40 years or so. And these declines are continuing. And of course, you can also derive the results per country and analyze what is happening and call for action, particularly for grasslands in Europe and other areas. So this is the first way to monitor butterflies, but it's not the only one. There are also other methods. One of them is to monitor them for 15 minutes using the idea that Romain Julliard in the French Garden Biodiversity Observatory had in mind, where he was saying, well, I'm sitting in my garden, I'm not always doing anything, I have free time, why not use this time to count the butterflies? So the idea is very simple. Just find your favorite place, download the app. In the case of Vielfaltergarten, which is a German project, it has a specific app. We're also using the European app, which is Butterfly Count, developed by the European Butterfly Monitoring Schemes Network, or EBMS. And of course, we need to know something about the site as well. The same goes for the transects. The more we know also about the site, we understand what we are seeing. And then the task is very simple. In both the transects and the 15-minute counts, we need to try to count all the butterflies we see and identify them to the best of our capacity. We need to avoid duplicates, especially if you're in one site for 15 minutes, you might count the same butterfly twice. So you need to avoid that. And if you're not sure, then you count the maximum of butterflies seen of a given species. And then come again to the same site after a week or after 2 weeks. This is still optimal. And in Europe, we are saying people should do that between April and September. Of course, if the season continues into November, we never say no. In Israel, people do that year long, and because the butterflies are active throughout the year, we are telling them to come only every 2 weeks. But in order to analyze this data, you need at least 3 visits within a year, and that we can count in some places as active visits. And we guide people, we guide you, whoever wants to do that, to take an area of about 500 square meters, like 20 or 25 meters in areas. But of course, if people do more or less, the app hopefully can also see where you are by recording the butterflies. And I'm telling all that because we were very excited to see that when you use a different monitoring scheme and a different protocol, which is very simple and intuitive, you attract not only the experts but also the beginners. We started with the Vielfaltergarten project. Vielfalt is diversity in German, and Falter is a word for butterfly, one of the words, and Garten is a garden. So it's a game of a word game between the options of doing butterfly gardens and looking at the diversity of butterflies. We started during COVID times, building up the portal, building up the app, starting to develop the materials. And by the end of our official start, or the official first funding, we had about 810 people that joined the project, and 1,200 observations collected. By now, we have more than double the number of active people in several cities, including also Mannheim, Berlin, Belgrade, and others. And I'll tell about that in a few minutes. An interesting thing that we noticed is even beginners have eyes, meaning that if we give them the list of common butterflies, but we allow them to expand to any species, they will actually report also on rare species that we didn't anticipate in the beginning, or at least didn't hope that they will report on. So these are just examples of the butterflies that people have been reporting. And basically, they covered almost all the butterfly species that we knew that exist in the area of Leipzig. But what happens if you're in a tropical area? And in these areas, if you're in a forest, we had the opportunity together with the family to go to South America and to Peru. And of course, we wanted to go as deep as possible. into Manu National Park. And then when you go up, butterflies might be up there. So what do you do in that case? Well, if the butterflies don't come to you, you have to do something about that. And for that, Chris Van Spy and others developed also other methods which are based on bait traps. And the idea is very simple. So let me take you first of all with me to South America and to the trip we had. When you go into Manu National Park, you'll encounter many different species, of course, of birds, of butterflies, caimans all over the place. You encounter also the glasswings and other transparent butterflies. And one of the most amazing things is also to take the night walks and to experience the forest at night and the butterflies sleeping. I had the opportunity also to finally go with the UV light and fulfill my youth dream of finding scorpions, given that they are shining in UV light. And that was for me a highlight of the trip. But another highlight was to go to Manu Learning Center together with our fabulous guide, Christian, and together with Jackie and the group over there, and to join them in setting the baits. They're using two types of baits every week for 10 years already. Laying in 1 week, they would lay fish baits. They are based on tuna, which stinks. And in the other week, they would use fruit-based, again, rotten fruits that attract many butterflies, particularly from the Nymphalidae family that will come to the rotting material and drink from it. And then you hang one at 1.5 meters. This is hanging already, I'm happy. Then you hang the second one higher and higher. And then I got the tip, close your mouth when you're doing that, because I got a shower. And in the next 2 hours, everything was stinking of tuna. So I had to take a shower and continue on, but still that was an experience to hang them together with the team doing that, dedicated people, volunteers coming to Manu National Park and the Learning Center. And every day then, every half a day, checking the baits and then releasing the butterflies. 560 different species of butterflies collected and then released, of course, through this process. And you wouldn't have had these butterflies unless you've hanged them at 30 meters or 1.5 meters, etc., and doing that systematically. Pretty amazing data set, which could be indicated, for instance, used for indicating what is going on. When I was visiting them, one of the interesting questions from my side was, what about the 15 minutes protocol? Actually, if you go out uh, to the coast, you'll see completely different butterflies just 10 meters away from the learning center. And when people take breaks, maybe they can go and see the butterflies paddling there. So this is another behavior of drinking the mud, basically. Usually these are males. And within 15 minutes of a count, not knowing any of the species, I simply took pictures. But then once you have the pictures, an expert can verify for you. And we had about 15 butterfly species, and that was not even a big flocking of butterflies within that site. Potentially, these are also very different species to the ones you would see if you are capturing them with the rotting fruits. So my idea was, or still is, that we can complement different types of data and butterflies by using different methods, but also attracting different people. For instance, visitors to the site might decide that they want to watch the butterflies in the garden or something else. However, after 8 days of traveling within these jungles, which was an amazing experience, together with family, we also continued on with the boat, and towards our way out, we could see growing amounts of gold mining, illegal gold mining. In the beginning, I had to hide myself so that people don't notice that I'm taking pictures. Later on, when you're approaching the nearest village or town, they don't hide it all. There's a police station. They don't do anything about that. The water is completely filthy from the cleaning up of the gold, and they're also washing in lead and other materials that then continues flowing into the river and on into the Amazon and poisoning both people and nature. Once we take the flight, you could see also the gold mining areas where you're losing more and more forest areas. Which brings us to the threats. And the threats are not only gold mining in Peru, but also agriculture and deforestation and making up space for other things but nature. These pictures you wouldn't be able to spot in the world unless I tell you that these pictures were taken when I was visiting a dear colleague and friend of mine in Argentina, Gustavo Zurita, who's been doing monitoring of birds, later on beetles, etc. And what you're looking at is a field of soy, which is located in a place which used to be a forest. And in the other side, this is a plantation, eucalyptus plantation for wood. And both of them are taking the place of what used to be a subtropical forest. And of course, when you watch the birds and you're standing in this field, it's hot, it's unbearable, and you don't see any birds or butterflies or almost no species. But if you want to know what is the impact of deforestation, you need to monitor that. And this is what he's been doing. So we have the threats of losing nature, basically. And one of the threats which are occupying me for quite a few years is the expansion of agricultural areas. And the problem is quite simple. We want to feed the world, we want to feed people, and we have to admit some of the butterflies are actually pests, like the small cabbage white on the left side, the larvae of the big cabbage white, and here's the green veined white. All of them would feed on things that we feed on, such as kohlrabi in this case. And so we use more and more space to feed ourselves, but not only us, but also the cows that we are eating. So we use it for feed and fuel. The picture you've seen before was rapeseed that we're using for oil and energy. And so we're taking more and more space. And by now, 70% of agricultural areas in Europe are actually used for feed and fuel and not necessarily for feeding people. So we're constantly hearing we need more and more space, which we don't have. Earth is a limited resource, and we are losing the habitats where the butterflies are occurring in favor of agricultural areas. And if there are pests, including butterflies, then we will use a lot of insecticides to kill them, or if there are weeds, we will use herbicides to kill them as well. And then, of course, we have all these people that want to improve their life quality, or they think at least they improve their life quality by moving into single houses with lawn in front of their area. And so we are losing open natural areas and fighting nature in favor of houses, of streets, lawns. And visiting Canada, I thought I would be seeing a lot of beautiful nature in the Rockies, but another thing I could see was huge cars, huge agricultural areas, and things that are very remote from nature. And then if you have all these cars, you have to park them everywhere, and then you're losing more and more area for things which are not even our life quality, but the life quality of our cars. So we have all these threats and the conflict between nature and the needs of people that are growing in consumption of areas and materials. And we want to act. We don't want to act against people. We want to act with people and for people, but for the life quality of all of ours, or of our shared resources of people and nature. So after I've finished eating the mango, I could offer it to the butterflies here in Puerto Iguazu and enjoy them. And so the question is, how can we all enjoy a future world where both nature and us are living together in? And the first action is coming back to the Vielfaltergarten project. It's to work together. Here, in this case, it's together with the city of Leipzig that actually, even before the project, decided to improve the quality of green spaces. Here's the mayor of Leipzig. Of course, he likes taking these pictures of himself for good reasons, actually doing something for nature and bringing seeds and seeding an area which was restored. And we were monitoring the butterflies later on, and we could see that indeed you do see more butterfly species. After you improve the management, you reduce the mowing intensity. Here's a specific mowing machine, which is a lot more careful and doesn't kill on the insects, and doing gradual mowing instead, or stapled mowing, instead of mowing the entire area in one go. And we were, of course, activating people and asking ourselves, okay, does it work? And the answer is yes, it does work. In a paper that was published recently by Andrea Burman, in basic and applied ecology, we could see that indeed the first patterns that the data from the citizen science or from the volunteers are producing is the typical ones that you would expect. So the more built up areas you have, the less butterfly diversity you see. the more landscape diversity you have, a combination of houses, green, parks, etc., the more or the higher Shannon diversity of the diversity of butterflies you see. And if you are reducing the intensity of mowing on the left side compared to very frequent intense mowing, then you'll see more butterflies. So intensive mowing is a killer, and if you reduce intensity and you leave some unmowed areas, you will improve the quality of the green space for the butterflies. The other thing you can do is also to learn why, not only what you see. And here you see an example of the division of different traits of butterflies in the different green areas. And you can see that when you have built up areas, then usually you'll see only larger butterflies that reach these small green spaces between the houses. But if you have large parks, then you'll have also the small butterflies that usually would lay their eggs on alfalfa or other plants, trifolium, etc. And they benefit actually from mowing, not intense mowing every week, but they're benefiting from taking off the grass within the parks. So with this experience in Leipzig, we thought let's expand that. And within an EU project called UNP Plus, which is about urban nature plans, we're trying to improve the urban green spaces and improve the nature plans so that we operate a greener area with more shade, with more quality. I don't know how many of you heard about the efforts that the city of Paris has done for the quality of life inside Paris, simply blocking out streets, removing the cars, making green spaces with shade for people, for nature. And they've been also been monitoring butterflies for a long time. And so we have Leipzig, Berlin, Paris. Meanwhile, Mannheim, Belgrade, and other cities have been joining us. And this is an invitation to take an action, to bring the data to municipalities, and they can also use this data to show that they're doing something for their citizens. So basically, this is the way to work together. In the US, one more example I wanted to give is the need to expose the impacts, the need to know what are the biggest killers of butterflies in the US. Here's an analysis which took 2 years to produce from colleagues in the US, showing that actually it's not climate change which is the worst thing. It's not the herbicides in agriculture, but it's the insecticides that kill most. So if you look at the list of factors here in this complicated figure, you can see on the lower part weather, then land and land use, but then the pest control methods. In orange here, you could see the neonicotinoids are the biggest killers for butterflies, and they're also poisoning our food and water. And so it's also about human health and not only about the quality of butterfly habitats. In the EU, one of the topics that became an issue and also occupied me as a scientist for a good 2 years was the new idea of establishing a new policy, a new regulation or a law, if you want, to protect nature, but also to restore nature and improve the quality of the existing natural protected areas. And we've been very supportive of that and analyzed whether the law could work. And we came up with answers that yes, in a paper from Daniel Hering. We showed that if this law indeed would be adopted, it will have a major impact. It could be a game changer. But then there was a big fight, a political fight around this law, and we found ourselves in the center of this fight, not necessarily center in being the ones fighting, but supporting this law and trying to provide the evidence from science of why this law is so important. We also published open letters. We had events explaining this. And eventually, after a big fight over this law, it was adopted in 2024. The reason I'm telling this is also because butterflies were part of the law and they are now obligatory to monitor because they're part of the indicators of success or failure of this law. Using the knowledge, using the methods of monitoring, the transect monitoring methods that Ernie Pollard developed, the Pollard walks being walked all over Europe allows to define within this policy that in Article 10, the state of pollinators has to be monitored, and of course are one of the groups to monitor. And within Article 11, which is about agricultural areas, butterflies, the grassland butterfly index is being used or will be used soon as one of the indicators for success or failure of the common agricultural policy, being one of the key policies of the EU and one which is trying to do better, but not necessarily. So can we expand that towards the global arena? in a paper that Federico Riva published just recently with many of us butterfly experts and enthusiasts providing the data. He tried to put as many data as possible from as many monitoring schemes in the world that you can think of. And he reached 37 countries contributing their data. It does not mean that these are the only countries in the world, but these are the countries where we could find data from transects being monitored for a long time. And so the question is, can we bring that to policymakers and act for the protection of nature? Well, first, for that, we will have to expand the monitoring efforts. But then, of course, we have the risk that policymakers will not care about what we're saying, because we're in the middle of a period where there are multiple crises, and people say, well, are you crazy? Really? Now we have a health issue. Now we have climate change. We have a financial crisis. We have a war going on. But many, if not all, of these global crises are actually interlinked. In a review that we just published recently about the so-called polycrisis, we found 23 different types of crises globally, which are environmental, they're socio-political, they're economic. And part of the problem is what you call democratic landsliding. So if you're living in a democratic country, policymakers don't necessarily act as democratically as you would expect them, and they don't care about nature or what we're telling them. So looking forward, I've put this butterfly on the right side, which is the 88, 88, because I think we need to move forward from 84 to 88 and to think forward of how do we act? What can we do together? The first thing we can do is to count. So we're counting on you. If everybody counts, then you count with us, and we count on you to deliver the data, and together we all count, and our voices might count. So there are different ways to do that, and there are different apps, like the eButterfly hosting this Global Butterfly Week. There's the Butterfly Count app in Europe, which is constantly being expanded and used also in other countries of the world. Now it's called Globe BMS. You can also do it with iNaturalist, but I wanted to highlight that the important thing is to think always about monitoring, not just to observe and take a photo, which is nice, of course, upload and share it, but to report all the species from the site where you're visiting, or to use a protocol like the one I told you about, and return to the site first, again and again in the same year, because butterflies are seasonal, different butterflies will be active in different times. Return to the same site next year, and then you can also become a citizen scientist in the full way of it, even design an experiment, do something in your garden, and then see whether it helps. And this will be fully fledged citizen science in the form of being active and part of it, and maybe even analyze your own data. If you have a garden, of course, you can also act and take an action in your garden and make it from a lawn into a prairie or a place which has more than just grass. So you can allow some weeds to survive. So don't cut all the weeds, don't use pesticides, plant local plants, etc. I think the don'ts and don't do are pretty clear and obvious for anyone that has gardens. So we want to shift from lawns to something which is not only green, but also beautiful and has some nature in it. And that requires accepting diversity of plants, accepting diversity of species, needing them. And once you're doing that, you can also talk to others. Here's a phone call that I got from a colleague finding this larva, which caused me to immediately inform also others, oh, look for the larvae, and you can save them. And also in agricultural areas where you have fennel, careful before you cut down the fennel and use it, because there are also the pupae that need to overwinter of the big swallowtail. The next thing you can do is to simply think about your own power and the voting that takes place not every 4 years, but every day, or every few hours when you're using your money, and you need to think, how do I use my money in a better way? For instance, voting for better food, where if it comes to organic food or local food, or if you pay a farmer that you know that this farmer has some nature on their fields, then you know that you help supporting a system which is healthier for your own food and for nature, etc. And finally, of course, we want to speak up. We want to take this knowledge, to take our experience, and to speak up to your neighbors, to the municipality, to policymakers, bring other people on board and work together. So with that, I would like to invite you, if you are living in a certain city and you want to work with us in UNP Plus, We are always welcoming new cities that want to join us. And soon we hope to expand these efforts also to the global arena and to start working together on global butterfly conservation. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and welcoming your questions. Thank you.
Oh well, that is awesome, guy. Really, I really like the way you structure your talk. That where like you start with something biological, purely biological, and then like everything still circles down to policy and like this call of action that I share with you. It's a really powerful call for action, and so thank you so much for that. And so before I just send you all my questions, because I do have more comments or questions or praises. I don't know. I'll just open the floor for other people in case we have a few in YouTube. Feel free to use your YouTube chat if people there, and I'll pass on your questions. Here in Zoom, I'm enabling people to unmute themselves. So if people have any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves and yeah, just shoot away your questions. Let's see. And YouTube takes a little while because it's like kind of delayed the transmission from what we are doing right now. But so far, I don't see any questions in YouTube. And here, people in Zoom, no one. Well, I do have a few, and even uh, again, I think I don't know if I told you at the beginning, but I do work with social ecological systems, and that was my PhD. So it really like touches deep down what you are just explaining, how to everything is coupled, and I really liked it, and how to include community science. I think it's very important. Which, by the way, and just as a general note, for people also hearing, like I always refer to community science, not citizen science, since people without citizenship can be also scientists or contribute as well.
It's actually correct. I'm not even a citizen in Europe, so that's completely correct. So
Exactly.
community science is much better, but I'm used to saying citizen
Yeah,
science.
it's
So
so
thanks for
common, right?
correcting me.
Yeah, I know. It took me like
And
years. Yeah.
for all of us who are not scientists or not familiar with the term, Rodrigo was referring to social ecological science, socio ecological systems, which basically is the idea that we are all part of a larger system. And so the interaction between the social system or the socioeconomic system that we're living in and the ecological system are tightly related to each other. And many of us also working on these systems are aware that some of the solutions that currently we are hearing about, for instance, about climate change, might be useful for climate change, but other might actually be harmful. On the other hand, many of the solutions that we're trying to find for nature are usually also climate friendly, such as don't cut down the forest, or restore nature, or restore peatlands, etc. These are solutions that also have a value for nature, for people, for climate, for biodiversity, etc. And so the benefits to nature and to people are tightly linked to each other, but also the damages that we're bringing. If we're polluting the water, we're not only killing the fish, but we're also drinking this water. So
Exactly.
this is the entire idea of a socio-ecological system.
I couldn't say it better. And so thanks. And well, I mean, the what it really makes me feel committed with socio-ecological systems and is how they are depicted in community science, right? How actually there is a really nice way where how society connects with nature and that can impact policy down the line. So, and me personally, as coordinator of eButterfly, even though I love that our data is used for research and then all that, very personal point of view, but I feel that our best product, let's say, that we generate is not the data but the awareness of people that are participating. and because that people that are spreading awareness, actually they turn most of lots of them turn into champions that can go out and do a lot of other things that might not be data related, but maybe lobbying, maybe just speaking with their neighbors, maybe planting or having different habitat management in their own backyards and stuff. So I don't know if you've seen with this long-term monitoring scheme uh, that change in people's mindset in your participants.
So, in fact, there are two aspects here which would conflict each other because I will tell two different things that seem as if they're not fitting to each other. One is that we've just ran a survey among our participants in Vielfaltergarten in Germany, and we tried to evaluate how this participation is changing their nature relatedness and what they're doing in their gardens. And we were surprised first that we only found nature relatedness improving a little bit for those that don't have a garden. Those that have a garden and participated were already quite related to nature. They were pretty connected. And the second thing is that when we expanded that and did it now with about 140 people, all of them seem to have the same profile. So we are preaching to the choir. What I'm basically saying is that those people that usually join us, as much as we are trying to bring people that don't care for nature, we always get more and more people that do care for nature. And at some point, I had to accept to give up. Why do I give up? Because there are so many people that do care for nature that I don't need to convince those who are not convinced. It's enough for me to empower those that do care. And that's where I do say that the data are really important because the data are empowering those champions to speak up. So what I do see and what we do see is that we have those people that have been monitoring for many years and they are owners of an area. They can tell from their own experiences what is going on. They go and talk to the policymakers and they're really the champions, they're the ambassadors. And that's where the data actually are the product because we're empowering them through the data. Without the data, we cannot show what is happening. So going there with your data at hand and saying, look, we're losing the butterflies, do something about it. We had groups of children writing to their school many years ago, it was about 20 years ago, writing to this municipality, don't kill our butterflies. But they needed the data that we collected so they know that the butterflies are there. So the combination of data and people creates an empowered community. It creates evidence-based policymaking because you give them the evidence whether they want it or not. The community produces the knowledge and you are empowering the community to speak up. The same with the farmers. We're trying to empower farmers to speak with their own voices. We had an event in Brussels where we brought the farmers and said, you know, I can speak on your behalf as a scientist, but it's much better that you say it. And when the farmer says, look at my fields, this is a monoculture, it's all dry, I have climate change impacting me, I need your help to plant the trees, then we're giving that farmer the power to speak up. And of course, if they have additionally the data to show for some of the farmers, look, in my field, there are more butterflies, there's more nature, there are more flowers, but I don't get the support from you. I need the support of the policymakers, then they act with this data. So that's what we're trying to do by bringing the data, the people, the community, and the policymakers, and trying to close the loop of what you call science policy, science society interactions.
I love it. I love it. That you're right on the spot, and you're right. It's actually like a twofold benefit. It's not just the awareness or just the data, but it's this really nice uh, mix that we get with community science, where you have both of those things together that actually synergize at the same time, and yeah, I love it. And actually, that brings me to the other point that I was gonna mention, and also just to see your opinion about it. And it is, I see one of your slides. You were mentioning the different initiatives, eButterfly, INAT, the butterfly scheme, butterfly count, whatnot, and how they fall within a range of data quality, let's say, or data. And what I always tell to our users or prospective users is that if you are already out there and you are out there wanting to help your species, well, why don't you do what helps the most, right? So And just maybe I would like to stress out here how important it is, not only as you said, to say, "Oh, I saw this butterfly," and that's it. That, yeah, it's nice. At least you know the presence, but there are many pieces of the puzzle that are missing that are gold for researchers, and and you're missing. And if you are already there, you can actually capture that without any additional effort. Like at what time you got there and at what time you're leaving, and that so. And for that, some platforms such as iNet, which is fairly powerful in many of the other things, don't get me wrong, they fall short on that. And so there are many others, as Butterfly Count, as eButterfly, that has really strict sampling protocols that you can. So maybe I just wanted to highlight that, and just to see if you can talk to us a little bit more about how what is the difference from the scientist's point of view between one type of data set and the other.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I think this is a really, really important point, and I'm curious who's participating today who might be doing that or encouraging others to do that. But I want to give you the example of being in Manu National Park and collecting the data. So the point is that if you're looking now at global data, we have the amazing data set of the Global Biodiversity Infrastructure Facility, the GBIF facility, which collects by now billions of observations. Most of what you could do with these observations is to map where things are, not more, because we don't know what is the status of nature. Because if somebody is telling me, and usually they would only report if they find really rare species, like in the case of the pictures that I've taken in Manu National Park, it was the cock of the rock, a really unique bird species. Everybody's going to the same site. They collect observations of that individual or these individuals. That's not really high value. And what I tried to do when I was visiting them, I thought, well, I'm only there once. What can I do that has an added value beyond just I've seen a butterfly? And that's why I took the 15-minute effort to take all the butterflies that I see. Because the moment I've done that, it's not only that this is a full species list, but also a protocol that everybody uses everywhere in the world. I've recorded where this happened, meaning that another person can do a 15-minute exactly the same location again. But also, I recorded what is not there because everything that I didn't count was not there. Now, in a site that has 1,000 species, maybe not recording what is not there is not a big value. But by recording all the species, I can already see, for instance, or I could see as a visitor that was just there for 3 days, that there was a shift between the butterflies you watch in the jungle and the butterflies that you watch in the garden or on the beach. They are a very different set of species. But seeing a set of species required recording everything that you see. So a set of species is the full observation of a 15 minutes. Now all I did was to follow the protocol that I have from Europe and use it in the different settings. So the first thing that you could do is to try to follow the protocols. That's one thing that I could say. The second is to repeat, but the problem that I have with iNaturalist and why I do not report with iNaturalist normally is that it actually has two problems. One is that you need to take the pictures always. It will not take your data without the picture. Now, this means that if there's a really, really common butterfly, I will not take more and more pictures of that. So it biases me towards taking pictures only of those interesting things. And the second thing is that it doesn't actually have a protocol, meaning that usually you'll only have sporadic singular observations. And the worst thing that I've observed in some places in the world already is that in places where you have a community that uses iNaturalist, they feel that they're already doing citizen science or community science, and they will be opposing a new protocol. So I actually had this, what you call a founder effect, where they're already doing something, so they don't want to do another thing. Whereas people that already use a protocol and they understand why it's so valuable, they are always open to another one because it gets boring at some point. And so bird observers often would also do butterflies because they know the method, they know the value, they do the 5 minute bird counts. And then after they did the 5 minute bird counts, why not do 15 minutes when I'm taking a break and having a sandwich? So they don't mind and they understand the value. And so this is why this figure that I've shown, I'll show it again just for a wrap up. I think is really important to understand the added value of more and more. And it does not mean that there is no value of just reporting a singular observation, but reporting all the species, following a protocol, coming back to the site, registering the site, and returning to it in the next years also allows other people to come to the same site maybe 10 years later or 20 years later. Nowadays, there are people that follow the paths of Humboldt in South America and trying to collect the data in the same places a few hundreds of years later. So the range of options is large, but the more you understand why the protocols are useful and you return to the same sites, the more valuable your data are for understanding. This is really a treasure, understanding the trends, understanding how things are changing over time. If I return to the same sites where Livingstone was visiting in Africa when he visited the jungles in West Africa or East Africa, I would be able to see whether there's a change or not. If you don't see a lion there because it's built up area, then something has changed. The same for butterflies. So yeah, thanks for asking, Rodrigo, and I hope this helps wrapping up.
It does. It does. This is
The
great. This is great, and I really agree. And we mentioned at the beginning that you haven't had the chance of exploring e-butterfly. Would be great if maybe you could take a look whenever you have a chance, so you can have a look and maybe give us some feedback on how our protocols work. Which one thing for all people around here, we as scientists sometimes have the make the mistake of using fancy words that might scare people out. And when we say protocol, there's a lot of people that say, "Whoa, that's too much for me." So just people need to know that protocol is just a way of saying specific steps. In this case, is just this guy was saying steps as simple as you know what time you got there and you know what time you left. You have your protocol. It's a time count. So there's nothing to be afraid of. And in the end, the payout for conservation is gold. So before we
oh,
wrap up, I know it's super late where you are, guys, so I don't want to keep you up too late. But we have a question from Julie and from YouTube, and she says, "What can we do to make people give butterflies the true importance they deserve?"
I think it's a really interesting question. I'm thinking what the answer will be because I think what butterfly deserve is that we treat them better. And when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about my kids. I think about maybe it's a different question. Maybe it's also the question of how do we give our next generation, how do we give the kids the capacity to enjoy butterflies in the future? If we love the butterflies, then we want our kids to have the option of experiencing them as well. And that means that it's not only giving respect to the butterflies, but respect to ourselves and our own futures. And that means think about the world for a moment from the perspective of a butterfly, meaning not just flowers, but the host plants of the butterflies, meaning respect nature. Don't cut it and then try to restore, because restoring nature is always more complicated than not losing it. So if you have the weeds, don't cut them and plant something new. Leave them there. If you have invasive plants, it's a different story. But I think the main issue is to understand that most butterflies don't fly far away. They're very specialist. The larvae would only eat a certain species of a plant. And I think if we want to really respect butterflies, we need to eat in a healthier way. And I'm sorry for saying that, but from scientific perspective, we're eating far too much meat. And that means that I mean, I enjoy meat as well once in a while, but not the average of German is about 50 kilos a year, and American 100 plus. We're eating too much meat and dairy products, and that means also a lot of soil, a lot of area that is being used very intensely, or feeding the animals, feeding our cars, etc. So we need to be more humble in how we are using resources if we want to to leave some resources for them. So if we respect butterflies, then let's respect each other and be more humble. And yeah, it's eventually consumerism and how we are consuming so much. So it's a socio-ecological system. That means we're all there. So let's try to live together.
That's amazing, and that's a great way of wrapping up this guy. Again, I think I've already said it too many times, like throughout the presentation and at the beginning. Thank you so much for your time. This was like just a treat having this talk, and as I was saying, having it as a good bookend of this Global Butterfly Week, which has been amazing. So, guy, no, again, thank you so much. People watching on YouTube, Zoom, or maybe watching this later, thank you so much for your time. And please, in 2 hours, 3 hours time, we have the last talk of this Global Butterfly Week with Matt Wan. So please stay tuned. Then just a final call for action, just following what Dr. Guy was saying. Let's try to make healthier decisions, not only for us but for our environment. Uh, and of course, let's participate more in community science, not only during Global Butterfly Week, but throughout the year. It's fun, it's healthy, and just it's great. So you can do it, of course, using the Butterfly Count app, but also you can go to e-butterfly.org or download our app, eButterfly, to start your adventure as community scientist. Thank you so much, Guy, and yeah, we'll see you around. And thanks to everyone. Take care.
You.